It's not that trauma happens in life. Trauma is life. How you deal with suffering will define how you live your life.
Do you ever find yourself playing the victim in a scenario?
No. I refuse to ever be the victim, because if I'm the victim, that means I'm powerless. I believe that I am powerful and that I have the power to choose the life I'm created to live. Most Latino families that I know, your family would rather have you stay close to home and give up your dreams than pursue your dreams, even if it makes you leave home. Imagine if in Mexico City, if all of us began to revolutionize what it looks like to be Latino, we would change the course of Mexico's future and all of Latin America.
You were listening to the Mind Shift podcast. My name is Erwin McManus, and I'm here with my dad, Erwin McManus, and all of our special guests here in Mosaic, Roma Norte. Can you just make some noise real quick? Amazing. Okay, so today, what? Go where?
Take us.
Okay.
Take us somewhere.
So, we do a few different versions of our podcast. We do them live sometimes. We do them live at conferences or different places that we travel to. So it's very special for us to be here in Mexico City. I first started coming to Mexico City about 7 years ago, and stayed in Roma for the first time when I first came. So it's very nostalgic for me. It's very beautiful memories. And then to be here off and on for the last 7 years has been amazing. I have old friends, I have new friends, and I have new friends that used to be old friends and now they're new friends again. So I think it's just and especially in the season of life that we're in right now with church and our own lives and everything that's been going on, it's just such a great place to have a fresh start. But I'm 36 now. I know that my skin is beautiful and glowing. but there are moments in my life, especially even my early 20s, where things that happened were really hard to navigate through. And the way that this podcast started was about 7 or 8 years ago.
Maybe 10 almost.
Well, yeah, because we were starting a campus called Mosaic Venice, which I had the privilege of being a part of for 4 or 5 years until COVID hit. And I was too afraid to communicate on a stage by myself. It's like riding a bike, except for scarier because there's 1,000 people watching you. So I had gone to my dad and said, hey, I don't feel comfortable enough starting this campus and talking on a mic. I'm a little bit better now. We've grown a little bit, in the last 10 years. But would you do it with me? And I can ask you questions, and you're the wise one, I'm the dumb one. You're smart, you're tall, I'm small. And then I can just ask you the questions and you can make me sound smart by answering them with really great answers.
But really, before that, I had cancer.
Yes.
And I had stage 4 cancer, and we didn't know if I would survive.
You got it real close to your mouth.
And Aaron came to me and said, Dad, if you had died, there's so many questions that I would have never had the chance to ask you. So could we start a podcast where I could ask you questions and maybe we could leave that wisdom behind for the world?
Yes. And that book was called The Last Arrow, which talked about leaving nothing for the next life. And I had just come from New York City, and I was working in fashion at a company called YSL, Yves Saint Laurent. And I was also helping at a church there. And I had all of these trauma things, you know trauma? Yeah. She sucks. Trauma sucks. So it's all my ex-girlfriends and one thing inside of me, giving me anxiety all at the same time, and my mom and my sister,
So Aaron thought that today we could take a few minutes and talk about how to overcome trauma. How many of you would say that you've experienced trauma in your life and that you're still maybe working through it? I'd just love to see
yeah,
most of us. And those of you who did not raise your hand, it's coming.
That's good. It's coming. No, but I think, I think trauma is one of those things that, became very popularized. But the reality is just it's when you experience hard things or bad things and you have this whiplash nature, maybe inside your soul or your mind or your heart. And sometimes it's physical. And I think that it manifests inside of our bodies, inside of our minds, inside of our souls, in our relationships, our workplaces. And it's something that I've had the pleasure of being able to pick your brain and get your advice again and again, navigating through traumas that I've experienced in my life. And so I think it's really important to talk about mental health. The only way to get stronger is to work on it and to develop it. So I thought that trauma would be something that'd be interesting to talk about today.
And being from El Salvador, we never talked about mental health. Like it was taboo. In fact, I remember one time my grandfather told my wife, "Do you want to know the secret of a long marriage?" My wife said, "Yes." He goes, "Never tell your secrets."
That's not good advice.
It was like the most unhealthy thing a human being could ever say.
He was built from a different generation.
Yes, and he's the one that raised me. And so you never talked about trauma. You never talked about pain. You never talked about any kind of emotional distress. And you certainly never talked about mental health.
No.
And I have one advantage that Aaron did not have. I did not grow up in the church. So I never had church hurt. I never had trauma from inside of a spiritual space. But Aaron grew up in church, and so he had an immense amount of trauma and hurt and pain from inside the spiritual space. And so his experience was very different. I had trauma, but I never connected it to God because there was no God to connect it to. But when you have God and you still go through trauma, you're like, "God, what good are you if you didn't keep me from that deep level of pain?" And I think that's a part of the conversation that we should have.
Yeah, which part? I think that's been like a part of the struggle of like in faith, I think, I grew up and I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I felt like I had experienced like this unique experience with God. And now looking back going, okay, can a 4-year-old experience or start his faith journey at that young of an age? But I think the way that I classify that in my mind is that I loved my parents and I know that they loved God. And so the closest thing that I had, it was like this ladder of relationship. I respected my parents, I loved my parents, and I loved the fact that they loved something even more than me. And so I kind of like, hey, I love what you love, and so what you love, I love, and I want to give my life to this. Little did I know that the next 30 years of my life would be much more complicated. That things are super simple at 4,
Yeah, they get worse.
They get worse. They also get better. Yeah. And so I think there's, then fast forward to like 16, 17, 18, you were a really quite like successful speaker and writer and all of these things. And I didn't really understand because Mosaic in LA is a very like beautiful boutique kind of church. It has a big reputation, but it like has beautiful local people that are just a part of the community. And then there were people who were like trying to kill you at one point.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the dark side.
Yeah. And so your best friend was this big guy who used to be, you know who Denzel Washington is? Why you laugh like that, bro?
You guys like Denzel Washington?
Yes, Man on Fire.
Okay, so I was at his house for 4th of July. I've never said that publicly, but
this is my story. Stay on your side.
Why did you go to his house for 4th of July?
I did. You didn't invite me.
No, go ahead.
Weren't you the only like?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyways, he was the only Latino in the entire party. Okay. So, anyways, Denzel Washington's bodyguard goes to Mosaic, and all of a sudden, this big man named James is standing behind you after service. And everyone who knows you like drive yourself to church. You walk in by yourself. You carry your own things. You get your own coffee. You're just a normal person. And then all of a sudden, there's this like 6'4" big dude right behind you. And I'm like, James, why are you so close to my dad? And he goes, you need to talk to your father. And so I'm in college at the time, and I ask you like, Dad, what's going on? And you're like, there's just like a little bit of something happening. And I was like, what is that little bit of something? Tell me right now. And you know how he talked about like not being able to share his trauma? Well, he finally like broke it down after we got into a little fight. And I said, you need to tell me what's going on. Like, I'm not at home. I live at college. Mariah's at home. Are we safe? And you're like, no, there's some people trying to kill us. He says it just like that. Like, there's no big deal. There's just like a few guys who have posted images of our family on the internet saying they're going to kill us on this exact moment, on this exact Sunday, blah, blah, blah. And so there began my trauma.
And they were Christians who
that we knew
used to go to our church.
Yes. And so,
or I used to go to theirs.
However you want to say. People we knew.
Went to theirs, yeah.
And so it was interesting because like I had grown up in my life with this like unique experience with faith, and I felt like I believed in God. I felt like I loved Jesus. I felt like I did all the right things. I had to go to church, but I went to church. And so I felt like I did all the right things to get protection and love from God. But I think I was looking at my faith and my relationship with God as like this unique kind of space of like, the more I do, the more he'll protect me.
Right.
And that was this like rude awakening of like, even though he still protects me, there's still just humans involved. And the human like part of that like not algorithm, but a part of that like mathematical equation is the variable that we can't control. And why would we want to control humans? We don't want to control each other, right? We want to like live in freedom. But I had to like come to this realization that there are things outside of my control that I was going to be affected by for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so now like 10 years later, we're here in this space, and it's so easy to look at things and go, okay, I feel the trauma and the weights of the last 10 years or 20 years.
Yeah.
But I felt like so much of my trauma was like wrapped up in this idea that it was us versus them. It was me versus everyone else, and I had to protect me and my family and myself from every like variable out there in the world. And I've broken down to you so many times where I'm like, Dad, at what point do you just give up on humanity?
And I'm going, well, they're my favorite species. And so
I like dogs.
Dogs are great, I have to admit,
great.
but we can't give up on humanity, because in that sense, we give up on ourselves.
Yeah.
And yes, and I think that's a part of the challenge, is that even when you're trying to do good in the world, bad things happen. And somewhere along the way, people tried to say that if you believe in God, bad things never happen to you. And then when you go through bad things, you're wondering if God let you down, or maybe God isn't real. And I think that's a part of the trauma of it. And then a part of the challenge is,
it would just be so simple if it was that, though.
it's so much more, isn't it?
Because it frustrates me that God's real. Because it would be so much easier to disconnect from all things that God created if he
it would be
wasn't real.
so much easier to just explain life if God didn't exist.
Yeah.
People are just bad.
Yeah.
You know, we're just bad actors, and we do bad things to each other, and we're just evolved tigers and gorillas and cheetahs.
What do you mean? You think we actually came from gorillas?
No, what I'm saying is that if there was no God, we'd just be animals. So it makes sense why we would devour each other and destroy each other and take advantage of each other.
Yeah,
there's something higher about us.
Yeah, what is it?
It's the image of God in us that lets us know that's not the way we're supposed to live.
So how do we get so far away from the image that we were created in? Like, how have we gotten here? Because there's this like amazing quote. Have you ever heard of the movie Fury with Shia LaBeouf? Mm-hmm. And like, who else is in that movie? Shia LaBeouf, Brad Pitt. Yeah. Good Lord. I know God's real when you see a Brad Pitt. You're like, God, you spent too much time on him. Give me a little bit of that. But there's this line where I think John Bernthal says, just wait till you can see what a man does to another man. Yeah. And so we live like in this crosshair of like humanity, right? That there's so much good and there's so much bad, and we love and we try to be kind and good and like at service to each other. But then there's just this reality that like there's wars in the world. There's people who are hungry. There's people who are lonely and homeless and depressed and anxious. And I'm one of those people that can be depressed and anxious. And when you kicked me out of your house, I was homeless at one point. I'm kidding. But I think there's like this intersection of like how to exist inside of our humanity and not feel that everything that humans do to us is at the detriment of humanity's reputation.
It's what
does that make sense?
To each other. Yes, it does. I think part of it, we need to realize that, and I don't want to sound too bleak, but I think this is important. It's not that trauma happens in life. Trauma is life. That how you deal with suffering will define how you live your life. You can't escape suffering. You either will suffer silently inside of your own soul because you're so afraid to risk that you never risk living a big life. Or you risk a big life and you suffer because life is full of failure and pain and disappointment and people. I kept saying the world would be perfect if it wasn't for us, right? But then there are still termites, so that's not true, right? But what we have to realize is that we are a domino effect of brokenness, that all of humanity is broken, that all of us are fragmented and we have jagged edges. And even when we're the best of us, there's still a part of us that is the worst of us. And, I think for me, my greatest frustration is I remember when I did not believe in God and I did not know Jesus. I actually wanted to make the world better. That didn't happen after I believed. Before I ever believed in God, I wanted to make the world better, but I couldn't make me better. And I kept thinking to myself, if I can't fix me, how can I fix the world? And so what we need to realize is that there is pain in the world because all of us are in pain. There is trauma in the world because sometimes we are like out of control cars and our souls are drunk drivers running red lights, and we crash into other people and their choices may have been good choices, but then our choices were bad choices. Then we cause trauma and pain in other people's lives because we are all interconnected and we all keep crashing together every day of our lives.
How do we stop? Because I think that's the unique thing, right? Because I think, I told the stories in the beginning to kind of set like a foundation of no matter what you do in life, there will be things that hurt, right? Inside church, outside church, around church. Like there's just brokenness. There's also like beauty. And I think like in our name, in Mosaic, not mind shift, but in Mosaic, I grew up with you always kind of repeating the ethos of what the name represented, that it was this art form. A mosaic is an art form of broken and fragmented pieces that when you shine light through it, it creates something beautiful. And so there's this like experience of humanity that once we shine light through even the most broken things, the messiest things, there's something that's beautiful created outside of it. But how do you last long enough to experience the beauty?
Well, I think I'm just going to break you down.
Not in front of everyone.
No, in a positive way. Because
this is reverse therapy. No. You pay me.
Because you experienced some pretty, I think, dramatic trauma in your life. And it caused some deep wounding and pain.
Yes.
Caused you to run away from church,
yes.
God, Jesus, life.
Yes.
Which caused more pain and more brokenness in your life. And then I've watched you heal. And I've watched you move toward wholeness with such intentionality that you are definitely my hero.
That's very sweet. You're going to just slide that in there.
And I want to talk about the choices you've made to get better.
I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm ready for that, but let's talk about it.
And I think it's what everyone needs.
Is this helpful? Yes. Okay, somewhat interesting. They're like, yeah, we get to know all his bad stuff. Yes, let's go. But let's walk through it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I look back and I think, one, you refused to stay where you were. And you've been in therapy, you've searched, you've read endless books, you've had endless conversations with me, you've gone back and addressed issues in your life. And I think one of the reasons you've grown so much, moved to so much health, is that you did not accept that where you were and who you were was who you were created to be, and that you decided, I'm going to get to where I want to go.
I really I feel like that comes from the statement that I really have come to hate. And I'm sorry, because I know I've also said this, but it's that statement of like, you have to accept me for who I am. Have you ever had people who say that? We're like, but you don't love who I really am. Like, probably not. Like, I love who maybe you could. We all do to some degree fall in love with the person we hope you can be. Yeah. Right? In our marriages, our friendships, our relationships. And there's always gets to a point where like, there's always someone in the relationship who hits the ceiling. And I was like early on in my life, in my like late teens, early 20s, realizing I'm hitting this ceiling of like ignorance, of bitterness, of brokenness, that like I was no longer this potential for an art piece. I was like just the broken, jagged edges. And there felt like there was really beautiful people trying to like pick me up off the floor. And I just kept making everybody bleed in the process. Because I was a really rough person. I was really unkind. I would use other words if we're on the podcast, but we're kind of in church, but it's still this thing of like, how do you like, I know that I had you and you were kind of always this like lifeline of like, you would look at me sometimes and be like, you're such a hot mess, but I still love you so much. And you would kind of always like create space for me. So why risk your reputation on messy people? Because from the outside, like, you're this, like I know you from the inside. I have every password of every account, of every social media, not just me, Austin, like there's like 7 people who have every access to everything.
Yeah, I have no private life.
We like it like that.
I don't know a single one of my passwords.
We have a running open
They have every
list.
password to my life.
Yes. But I'm like, but for me, like, I think like that level of transparency is like really hard, especially like in the pastoral world, in a world where like pastors fall left and right.
Yeah.
And so many of your friends have like not made it.
Almost every single person that I grew up with who was a pastor crashed and burned.
And yet like you've never judged any of them.
No, because I know life is hard.
You've also like loved all of them.
Yeah.
Privately, because you don't do the public pretend thing and then privately talk trash thing.
Yeah.
Like other people we know.
I privately love
and publicly
affirm.
Yes.
Yeah.
But how? Because you're like, you achieved that thing that I'm like still trying to climb up to.
I want to go back to your statement. You don't accept me as I am, or you don't love me as I am.
Yeah.
You know, when you say that, what's really going on is you don't love you as you are. Because if you are so desperate to be loved as you are, it means you know they shouldn't. And you don't love yourself the way you are. And so maybe the best question to ask when you say that to someone is, what about me don't I love? And then ask yourself, do I have the courage to change? And I think that's important. And what I saw in you was a shift. Bitter people look for someone to blame. Whole people accept responsibility for their lives. I watched a seismic shift in your life. When you were really hurting and you struggled with bitterness and anger, you were angry at the world for a while. And there was just always a looking for who you could blame.
Yeah.
And there was so much blame. So you were never really wrong because it's easy to find the people who hurt you, right? They can't help you. And when I watched you shift and start going, it doesn't matter why they did what they did. It doesn't matter that they did what they did. It only matters what I do with what I am. That's when I watched you radically shift. And I don't think there's anyone in our family system that over the last 5 years has grown more than you or has changed more than you. And that's because of you've just taken ownership of your life. And healing comes when you take ownership of your life.
I appreciate the kind things, but you don't have to be so kind. You can go into the bad stuff too. Okay, do you ever find yourself playing the victim in a scenario?
No.
You're a bad person to ask these questions to.
I refuse to ever be the victim, because if I'm the victim, that means I'm powerless. I just think it's the milk toastiest, softest. I don't have any patience for me acting like a victim. And no, because I believe that I am powerful and that I have the power to choose the life I'm created to live. That I have the power of choice, the power of decision. I don't have control over life. I don't have control over the external circumstances. I don't have control over other people's actions. I don't have control of what people say about me, but I have absolute control and mastery of my inner world. And so no, I never feel like a victim.
Okay, so
but I understand.
You couldn't find one thing that you play a victim in? Okay, I have a question. You're someone who has like a lot of inner peace.
I do.
And I know that you would give like 99% of that credit to Jesus, if not all of it. But how did, and that sounds great, but for the rest of us, like how do you take that thing that feels so ethereal, right? Because I believe God is real. I believe in Jesus. I've also had moments where I've said to you, like, you know, you've asked, like, are you okay with your relationship with God? And I'm like, well, me and God are gonna fight when I get up there, and He might send me back down, but I'm gonna get back up. Because I do believe that my relationship with God, like, I do believe God is so big, I can ask big questions. Yeah. And that's something you taught me really young. Because I would ask you, like, I don't know if I believe in God. And you're like, it's okay, God's big enough. You can ask Him questions. Like, if you exist, show me you. You know, like reveal yourself to me. And there's so many times in my life from like a young age at like that 10, 12 years old where I was asking those questions to like now where I go, God, show me who you are. You know, and there's times, that's what I love about the Bible. The Bible is the greatest book ever. It's like HBO, Game of Thrones. Because it's so crazy. Like people in church get so awkward about sex, but like, have you ever read the Bible? Like my parents never talked about sex growing up, but I'm like, wait, how did I get here?
I told you, you came in a bubble.
So I know they had sex twice because there's two of us. But I always find it really interesting because I'm like, the Bible is like this really interesting culmination of like everything that everyone who's really loved and written about is really messy.
Yeah.
Like I imagine like there's, because there was other people that hung with Jesus, but Jesus never talked about them. Or he like, the worst person in the Bible has got to be the guy who like just got an honorable mention, or like the blind guy. Like he
just the blind guy.
Just
no
the blind
name.
guy. Like imagine if you knew for the rest of your life, you'd just be the blind guy. Like, can I at least be like blind guy number one?
The blind guy who made it in the Bible, but no one ever knew.
But no one ever knew.
Yeah, you can imagine at the end of his life, that's me.
But we get offended if like someone forgets our name.
Yeah, but you asked, how do you find inner peace?
I did ask that, and then I got funny.
Yeah, and here's the truth.
Talk to us.
Jesus says he came to give us peace, and there isn't almost a single Christian I know that has inner peace. We just don't talk about it.
We're talking about it now.
Yeah, and a part of why I started Mosaic is I wanted to create an honest place where we don't use cliches to pretend things work when they don't work. Inner peace doesn't come because you wake up on a Tuesday and go, Jesus, I belong to you. Now you have inner peace. You have to fight for inner peace. And I would say there's one specific battle you have to fight. You have to give up control of everything you have no control over and take control over the things you do have control over. And as long as you're trying to control what is out of your control, you will never, ever have inner peace. I don't care how much of the Bible you know. I don't care how much of the Bible you quote. I don't care how many times you go to church. You will never have inner peace if you try to control the things that are out of your control. And I think that my life was so out of control when I was young. I felt powerless in a world that was very dark and destructive that I realized very early, I have very little control over the world around me. But, and this is even before I came to faith, I realized that if you couldn't make me angry, you couldn't control me. If you couldn't affect my emotions, you couldn't control my inner world. I've been married for 40 years, and I think in 40 years, my wife Kim has never seen me lose my temper in 40 years. Now, let me tell you, I get angry.
It's so scary too. It's so crazy. It's like watching a volcano that you thought was a mountain, but now it's a volcano. You're like, no, go back. No, because it like nothing happens.
Yeah, I'm most dangerous.
You don't yell
when I'm quiet. If I'm absolutely quiet, something is probably going to happen in the world.
Yeah, but that's also where it's confusing because then you're quiet a lot.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you're quiet mad, but then sometimes you're quiet chill.
Yeah, but you can tell if I'm quiet happy.
That's why I ask a lot. I'm like, you good? Are you good?
No, but I learned early on that if I could take mastery over my emotions, and I think emotional maturity is primarily measured by your ability to control your emotions. If you cannot control your emotions, you're what I would call a child, even if you're a full-grown adult. If you can control your emotions, you are what I would call a mature human being. And you ever have people who go, you just make me so mad? No one can make you mad. They can give you the material for you to make yourself mad. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about is taking control over intense emotions so that you have those emotions, but they don't have you. You have mastery of those emotions. I'm a very emotional person. I'm Latino. I mean, I feel deeply, right? There's no question. I have fire inside of my soul. And when I was a little boy, I got so angry, I punched a hole through a wall. Me and my brother would fight. He was older than me. And he would always just kind of like beat me up. One day I hid a knife in a corner. I had him chase me to that room. I pulled out that knife and I said, today, you will not hit me again. And my older brother said, put down that knife or I'll tell mom. And I said, you won't be telling anyone anything.
That's so gangster and so ghetto.
And my brother ran and locked himself into a room, realizing he had pushed me beyond the edge.
Yeah.
I tell you this because I want you to know I wasn't born with control. I had to earn and learn and master my inner world. And that's what Jesus actually helped me do, because I didn't care about heaven. Like, it seemed like Christians were really focused on heaven.
Yeah, why aren't you?
Because I want to bring heaven to earth, not leave earth to get to heaven. And so I have a very different intention in my life. And so when I turned to Jesus, it wasn't Jesus take me to heaven when I die. When I turned to Jesus, it's Jesus change my inner world so that I can be a different human being. And from the beginning, I told myself, I'm going to be a social experiment. I'm going to see if a human being can actually have integrity. I'm going to be a social experiment. I'm going to see if a person can actually be good. I'm going to see if a person can actually be kind. Not because I worry about what anyone else says about me. Not because I care about my reputation. I just want to be the most noble version of me. And when you change why you do you, it changes everything. It gives you inner peace.
I love you. You're like a unicorn. You are. Because I know that like I've come like I grew up really angry. Like I had a really bad temper, and I think a lot of it was because I didn't know how to manage like the inner like turmoil that was going on inside of me. Right. I think there was a lot of mental health early on that I was struggling with. A lot of it was just being in proximity, and the reason why I think this is so unique, and that's not to talk about all of the bad things that have happened to us, but I do think it's that things happen in good places. Bad things happen in good places, but can you make those good places where bad things happen good again?
That's such a good question.
Time out.
No, you may not realize this, but you are an environmental species. So if you go someplace where you have positive experience, you will become the better version of you. If you go somewhere where you have negative experience, you'll become the negative version of you. Have you ever gone home to visit your family for the holidays? And you went back to the person you used to be, right? You're like, what happened? I thought I changed so much. You did, but the environment didn't. And the environment actually shapes you. So it's very important to design your life with environments that help you become the best version of you. And by the way, and I know we keep failing on this, but that's what the church is supposed to be. The church is supposed to be that communal environment where you become the best version of you so that you can take the best version of you into that big old nasty hard world that you have to face every single day. So yes, we are environmental, and you can make bad environments good by creating new memories in bad environments. But you have to do it consciously. You have to go, when I'm in this space, my soul goes dark because of pain I experienced here. So I have to create new memories in this place that replace that memory. And that's a huge part of what I did. By the time I was 10 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair, and I was in and out of a hospital for 6 months, dominantly for mental illness. And I lived in this inner world where it was just very dark and broken, and I didn't even want to exist in the outside world. And I had to make a decision in my life because I realized there were like 5 or 6 memories I always remembered. They were all the bad ones. I didn't remember the good stuff. All I remembered was the 5 or 6 traumatic moments in my life that were the most painful. And I became the memories I chose. So I made a decision when I was around 15 or 16 years old. I didn't know God yet, but I made a decision to start remembering my life differently. And I started looking for beautiful things all around me. And I became an aesthetic. And I didn't realize that that's really when the artistic part of my soul was awakened. I didn't become an artist because I thought being an artist was cool. I became an artist because I needed to become an artist to survive. Because I couldn't find a reason to live until I saw beauty and wonder. And all of a sudden now my life is changing. And now I have great memories of life. I choose the memories that shape me. If you don't choose them, they will choose you.
Do you have a second half to that? It felt like you could keep going.
Yeah, but this is our podcast.
I know. I know. We're getting close to how long have we been going? 30 minutes or so?
Do you want to open it up for some questions?
Yeah, good questions.
Okay. All right, we're going to open it up for questions, but here are the rules. The question has to be short. Okay?
And it can't have like a crazy long story before the question.
Right. And your question can't actually be a statement and not a question.
Yeah, it has to be a question.
And your question can't start with, when I was a child.
No one has enough time for that.
So would somebody like to courageously risk asking a question?
Oh.
All right. Tell us your name. Stand up.
Or if you want.
It's
hot.
I'm Nicole. I just am curious what your daily rhythms, so to speak, are to maintain not just your inner peace and your relationship with Jesus, but just as a human. What's your Tuesday, Thursday typically?
That's a great question, but Aaron has better rhythms than me.
I have better routines than you. You have better internal rhythms. I'm very influenced by my ecosystem. And so we travel a lot. And so it's taken the last year of really working with someone to create a routine and a rhythm for how I wake up and proceed throughout my day.
So what's your ideal day look like in the morning? Because it's really beautiful.
On a beach, not talking to anybody.
No. In your daily
and
rhythms.
Definitely not doing this in front of 200 people. I'm kidding. No, okay. So really important. It's your morning starts the day before. So making sure that I go to bed an hour before when I would normally go to bed. I could stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning. I grew up with you, very insomniatic, watching movies till late night. But then I realized that I was more emotional that way. So if I wanted to keep my emotions consistent and my mind consistent and my thought life consistent, I went to sleep earlier. It cuts down the snacking, it cuts down the video games, it cuts down everything. What I realized is going to sleep between 9:30 and 10:30, and then getting up at an earlier hour than I felt was comfortable, and then having plenty of time to spend the next few hours reading, spending time outside in the sun before 11 a.m. and making sure that I'm working on the things that I need to work on. So I'm investing in myself, whether it's going to the gym or going on a run or going on a walk or listening to a podcast, make sure I have time for myself before I have time for everybody else. And I also know that if I'm more prepared for my day, then I have increased my potential for bringing peace into every situation that I walk through that day. And that's a big part of what you've taught me, is to have inner peace, you need to bring outer peace. When you start bringing peace to other people's situations, you will find peace inside those situations, right? Sorry.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I don't want to share my rhythms because I'm a terrible example of how a human being should live. Okay.
But I would say we start every day, we say good morning to each other. We have done this since I got a cell phone at 14.
Every night, I text Aaron and I say, good night, buddy.
Yeah.
Or good night, my son. I love you.
Wherever we are around the world.
Anytime,
yeah.
No matter where we are, every night. The only night I've missed probably in the last 10 years was his
on
birthday.
My birthday. Are you serious? I was so sad. I was like, okay, 36, I really got to grow up now.
But we were just together. I left him, so I did it face to face.
Nah, no excuses.
But I always text him, and
yeah. No, but I think there's what that created is, and also this shift as well, because we're very close and we've refused to grow further away. Because we both mandate that with each other. We have an expectation of proximity that it won't change no matter how old we are. But that also changed with my male relationships. When I started telling my male friends that I love them and that I hug them, it was awkward and weird. And there's some friends who really received it really well, mostly the Latino friends, the Puerto Ricans really easily, and then the white people not so much, the real white people, the real LA, And I think there was it created these healthy things where he's not the only guy I text, hey, I love you. I hope you're doing well. I'm thinking about you. I text 3 or 4 other guys that throughout the week, throughout the month. And I think it's creating those symbiotic relationships that help anchor my health and mental health that way. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I'm not a structured person as much, but I spend a lot of my time in my inner world. And I write all my books inside my imagination. I write all my talks inside my imagination. when I prepare a message, even for Sunday, I work from the Bible in my head. I don't have to open up a book. I can just see it all there. And so I'm a person that I just live inside of my inner world. And then I go to the gym. And I love going to the gym by myself so that I can work out in my inner world. And
how bad does it suck that God made me your son? I ask you like every 5 minutes, okay, we got to work now. Okay, we got to do this. I need you to answer this question.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for Jesus, I don't know if I would have like chosen humanity. I think I would have lived on some mountain by myself, creating things that I sent anonymously to the world. Jesus gave me a love for humanity that I could not explain. And, but I live in the world of ideas, imagination, creativity. And I've been to 3 neuroclinics and they tell me that my brain is, odd. And,
yeah, well, you don't have to tell us that. Okay, next question. Hi, Rosie.
I'm raised in El Salvador too.
Oh.
But my question is like, as Latinos and like as our culture, in bringing heaven to earth, what are your thoughts on what are the things that maybe we should personally or as a culture focus on to kind of make that?
I think that's a great question, saying what things should we focus on as Latinos, right? We should stop using our culture as an excuse for not achieving greatness. And there are actually certain characteristics that people who achieve greatness all have. And they don't match a lot of what we say is Latino culture, And so if you don't show up early or on time, you will not establish a discipline for greatness in your life. If everything is, si Dios quiere, and because, listen to this for a minute. Si Dios quiere is a mental structure. It says life happens
Somebody
to me.
Translate that for me. Well, if God wants?
If God wills, right? If
God
wants,
God wills.
Si Dios quiere means si Dios quiere. It's like, it's like.
I got it.
And, if God wills, right? Yeah, but no, it's a mental framework that says I'm a passive journeyman through a life that happens to me rather than a life I create. And I remember years ago when I first started speaking in Latin America, sorry, I'm going back into Spanish now, and my brain, and this pastor said to me, pues hermano, si Dios quiere.
Yeah.
Y yo digo, no, Dios quiere. And like open your Bible and realize how much permission you have to live life. We always wait for permission.
It's not a passive book.
The Bible is not a passive book.
It's a very, very active book.
Yeah.
Too active.
Yeah. Don't wait for God to tell you to do something good. Do the good thing. Wait for God to tell you to stop. And I think sometimes, like, I love the humility that our culture has, but sometimes that you can only be truly humble if you know your power. If you don't know your power, it's not humility, it becomes weakness. When you know that you are powerful, you know what the most important muscle in your body is? It's your brain. And when you know your power and you develop your mind, that's when you have to become humble, because you'll know your power. But when people say, ay, no soy nada, like, I hate that. Yo sé, no hay nada. ¿Por qué? Become something. When you say, I'm nothing, no, you should never say that. You should say, I'm created to do something that matters in the world. These are the things we need to change as Latinos. Let me tell you, when I wrote The Artisan's Soul and they translated it into Spanish, the publisher that got it said, pick a different book. This book is too high thought for the Latin world. And when they sent me that message, I said, it can't be too high thought for the Latin world because it's written by a Latin mind. It might be too high thought for the Western world, but not for the Latino world. But that's the way the world sees us. Why? Because it's how we see ourselves. And so we need to become a risk-taking culture. We need to understand that God has already given you permission to act and to create. We need to stop thinking that the future happens to us. Look, bees create hives and ants create colonies, but humans create futures. Every day you wake up and you create by your choices. The most spiritual thing you do is not pray. The most spiritual thing you do is not go to church. The most spiritual thing you do is not read the Bible. The most spiritual thing you do is choose. Every day you make choices, and those choices are your spiritual actions. Before you pray, you have to choose to pray. Before you go to church, you have to choose to go to church. Before you read the Bible, you have to choose to read the Bible. The one unifying act of every human being that makes us spiritual and powerful is choosing. And so if I could just spread a movement in the Latin world of we are done being passive, we are here to create the future of humanity, it would change everything.
One more question? Anybody have one more? We got my man in the beanie. I don't know how you're alive right now in here.
So you talked about designing environments for mindship and for like trauma rehab, right? That's this church. But as a fashion student, like and from a literal like way, how can we design stuff? Or how can we design clothing or just environments actually for a mindship and for a trauma rehab, like for something like that?
I kind of lost the question. Did you understand?
No.
¿Lo puedes explicar en español?
O sea, even I don't get it in Spanish. So,
Okay, so it's not the translation. It's the idea.
Okay.
how can we actually and literally design stuff for a mindship or for a trauma rehab? Because there are spaces for it, but how can we design stuff for it?
This?
Now I understand.
Yeah.
Things like this will actually begin the process of changing your mind. And by the way, I wrote a book called Mind Shift. And just in case you're looking for a book that could change your mind, and
What's it called in Spanish?
Genio.
Yes, trick question.
Because you can't say mind shift in Spanish, all right? So it's genio. Because if you'll make these mind shifts, your genius will be awakened. And that's why I called it genio. And in the book are just these slight, subtle mental shifts that if you'll make them, it will change your life. Like, for instance, chapters 1 and 3 are a conflict. Because chapter 1 is people matter most. Every Latino will go, yes, right? People matter most. That's very Latin. But chapter 3 is you can't take everyone with you. That's not very Latino. That's more German. Right? You know? Most Latino families that I know, your family would rather have you stay close to home and give up your dreams than pursue your dreams, even if it makes you leave home. Yeah, come on, let's be real, okay? And sometimes you cannot choose both at the same time. I have talked to so many Latin parents who are trying to live out their own dreams through their children. They're trying to live vicariously through their children, and they expect their children to live their lives for them. As a parent, I don't want Aaron to live his life for me. I want to live my life for him because he's the future. And I wouldn't even be doing what I'm doing if I wasn't attaching myself to his future. And what we need to realize is that in our Latin culture, family is very important and it's beautiful. But we need to create a new paradigm of how we relate to family and say, I love you, but I'm going to be the first person in our family who breaks the cycle of poverty. I love you, but I'm going to be the first person in our family that breaks the cycle of being uneducated or illiterate. I love you, but I'm not going to go get a job working for him or working for my uncle or working for my dad. I'm going to start a company because someone in our families be the first person to start a company from scratch. You know why people become doctors? Because their families are doctors. They become lawyers because they have uncles and cousins who are lawyers. You know why we have 2 presidents that are father and son? Because when your dad's the president, oh, I can be a president. Because once you have someone in your family who did it, it breaks open the future. You don't need to do it just for you. You need to do it for the generations to come. And the moment, let me tell you, you do. The moment you start creating other people will start creating. And I remember when, Aaron and I have a fashion company. Everything we're wearing, we made. And I remember when we first went to fashion, people were like, pastors can't be in fashion. Where is that in the Bible? Like,
Why? Why?
Is that like in Leviticus or something like that, you know? And we're having, you know why pastors can't be in fashion? Because no pastor ever was. But the moment you do it, you destroy the wall. And then someone, there's going to be 1,000 pastors who are fashion designers, terrible ones, but they will be fashion designers. And, I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 5, 6, 7 companies in my life. And I used to try to do it secretly because it's not right. Because pastors aren't supposed to be good at creating wealth, right? We're just supposed to be asking you for money. At Mosaic, my wife and I were the highest givers of our church for 20 years. We didn't ask for money. We gave the money. And you know why we did it? Because we didn't believe that we should stay the way everyone always was. We wanted to set a new standard. I wanted to start companies so that my kids would know, you just start companies. That's just what we do. I wanted to create art because they could know we just create art. It's what we do. I want to do insane, risk-taking, courageous things so that they would know it's in our DNA. What is in your DNA? Because that's what you're going to pass on to the generations to come. Imagine if in Mexico City, if all of us began to revolutionize what it looks like to be Latino, we would change the course of Mexico's future and all of Latin America.
That's really good. I have a question for you. So, I hope you enjoyed this. This was enjoyable for you guys? We'll have to come back and do another one.
Would you guys want us to come back and do this again?
Yeah. I have one last question. Okay. I think this is really good. And also, let's talk afterwards if you're a fashion student, because I want to find out, as my question now, I'm sorry, because I want to find out where to get good fabrics here. Spiritual gifts. Churches love spiritual gifts. Christians love spiritual gifts. Why are you laughing? You can't laugh. But
I wasn't expecting this question.
why? Fine, next time.
No, it's good. Ask it. You're already there.
I was there, now I'm not there. Okay. So my spiritual gifts, how important are, I know the answer. I know that you find the spiritual gifts in the Bible to be limiting because you think that there are so many more spiritual gifts in the Bible than what are described in certain spaces. So how do you see spirituality and church kind of emerging, and how do we plug in our spiritual gifts? Because I think one of the things that his question was that, how do we create these spaces? I would say that that's this space. Yeah. The Mosaic is a church not for Christians, but for people who are on a journey for faith and mental health and passion and to be alive and to live more human. Because you see being more human as actually being the truest expression of God's creation in your life. Yeah. So can you walk us through that?
Okay, you're starting with spiritual gifts. You kind of went to 3 questions, but we're just going to roll with those.
No, I made 3. I don't ask questions. I actually just make statements.
Okay.
So
first of all,
we're working on it.
Do you know what the word gaudy is?
Gaudy, like tacky.
Like tacky?
But luxuriously tacky.
Is it better to say tacky? Yeah. All right, spiritual gifts are kind of like tacky jewelry.
What do you mean?
The people who usually wear them at church are really gaudy. They're just wearing look at me, I have these spiritual gifts.
Okay.
Spiritual gifts are never supposed to be something you take to church to show off. Why is everybody speaking in tongues in church? Just speak Spanish, right? It just makes more sense. Why?
But why? You're being very coy. Explain.
Yes, because spiritual gifts in the Bible are nothing like the way we use them in churches. Spiritual gifts in churches now are really about us.
Okay.
Spiritual gifts in the Bible are about others. If you have the gift of healing, go to the hospital and heal people. Quit acting like you only heal on Sunday at church, on television. And so we've distorted spiritual gifts. I believe in spiritual gifts. And I know that I have some. But using a spiritual gift should be something elegant and beautiful, not something showy and tacky and gaudy. And on top of that, we tend to like spiritual gifts because we don't like character.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, because if you have a spiritual gift, no one can question your character. But really, the measure of maturity spiritually is your character. Are you trustworthy? Are you honest? Are you compassionate? Are you loving? Are you disciplined? Are you faithful? those are actually the expressions of the character of Jesus. And I care way more about character than I do about gifts. I think I have a few gifts, and I think I use them well. And when my daughter traveled with me, and you did the same thing earlier, but Mariah traveled me around the world. She said, "Dad, you can read people's minds, can't you?" And I said, "No, I can't read their minds, but I can read their hearts." She goes, "Read their hearts. You're scary." And she goes, "No, I've seen you. You can look inside of a person and you know exactly what they're thinking." And I told her, "It's true. I can look at you and I can know if you're lying to me. I can look at you without you saying a word, and I can know if there's brokenness that you're hiding. I can look at you and I can see things that I don't even want to see because I don't want to know. I don't know how to explain it. I don't even talk about it publicly. And I'm only answering the question you've asked."
I know, that's why I asked it.
But I don't trust people who are on stages going, "You right here in row 3, and I think that is like from the pit of darkness. And you will never know that I'm using my spiritual gift with you, really. You'll just think someone cares about you and is helping you see yourself. Now, a few times I've used it with my friends who are atheists. Because I met this guy who was an atheist. He's a multi-millionaire, played pro football. And he said, "I don't believe in God." He was really angry. And I said, "Okay, I'm going to do something." He goes, "What?" I said, "I'm going to tell you what I see inside of you." And I looked at this massive football player and I told him everything I saw. He got very, very quiet. He said, "How can you know all this about me?" And I said, "I don't know. You're an atheist. You'll have to explain it later." He goes, "For me, the only value of any spiritual gift is to help a person come to know Jesus and experience wholeness and health in their life." And so that's the spiritual gifts question. I can't remember the end of it.
No, you're fine. That was great. I like that.
And I want us to, and I don't think we're supposed to become good Christians. See, I think we're supposed to become good humans. And we act like becoming a Christian is some category like being a zebra or being a giraffe. I'm a good Christian. The only way an actual Christian looks like is a human. And if you're not becoming a good human, you're definitely not a good Christian. Because Jesus is the perfect human. He's not the perfect Christian. He's the perfect human. And what he died to achieve in us is that we could become human again. And that really is the focus of Mosaic. We just want to reclaim our humanity and treat each other with that kind of love and respect. And I just think it could change the world.
Let me give it up. Hey, this is the end. There's no ending to the podcast. We just usually invite people to come back the next time, but we're gonna be back soon. So we have to come back and we have to do this again, and we'll do a longer Q&A, and we'll have people invite their friends. And
yes, and today is a part of something bigger.
Yes, talk to us.
Because we're a part of a church called Mosaic. It's a church that I happened to have started years ago. Dominantly, I started it in a nightclub that Prince owned in downtown LA. It's a very, very cool beginning. And I didn't start it really for Christians. I had a lot of friends who were atheists, agnostics, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Jewish, and I wanted to create a place where they felt comfortable to come and ask deep and meaningful questions about God and perhaps come to know Jesus. And I knew that they wouldn't ever walk into a church, and so I put it in the shadiest, sleaziest nightclub in LA. And every Sunday we'd go and move all the mattresses and all the used condoms and
the heroin needles and the cocaine and
it was brutal. We had to wear double rubber gloves to clean that place. And every Sunday we did that so that our friends who would never be in a conversation about God could be in a space where they felt comfortable to do that. And that's always been my heart for Mosaic. And we chose the name because a mosaic is a broken and fragmented art form. To say humans are broken and fragmented art forms. But when they're brought together and God's light strikes through us, something beautiful happens. And that's still our vision. So today was the beginning of a new mosaic. And we didn't know who would show up. And I told our guys, hey, if we have 10 people, we're going to start a new mosaic because Mexico City needs this. And so this is our third gathering today. We had 2 in the morning, one in Zona Norte,
Zona Norte.
one in Polanco, and one here. And we don't really know. Like I could say, where are we going to do next week's gatherings? I don't know. So sign up for our Instagram because we'll know by Sunday. Okay? Because like we're surfing this. We're just feeling this out. I don't have like a strategic plan. I mean, I don't get up every morning at the same time and read my Bible at the same time and drink my coffee in the same way. That's just not me. I dream. And then I see it in the dream. And then we try to turn it into reality. So we're in the middle of a mad scientist moment. And we just think that Roma needs this. And so how many of you, if we did this, I don't know, every week here would come back? I just want to know. Is this a good number of you?
Good
and how
amount.
many of you would invite your friends?
Okay. Because that's the thing.
Yeah, because we only want to do this if it helps you help your friends connect deeply to Jesus.
Yeah.
That's why we would do it together, right? You know, and because we don't really need cool church, but we do need a church we don't have to be embarrassed about to invite our friends to, right?
I think there's been a lot of myths of what Mosaic is.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think there's been a myth about this culture versus this like reality that like the truth about what Mosaic is it's David Perez, it's Isai, it's Isani, who I get them so confused. It's Dana, it's Danny, it's Saul, it's Luis, it's Bore, it's their wives, Abril and Ingrid. It's like the people here, it's like we haven't been as engaged or involved in Mexico City. So
that's changed.
It's changed.
Yeah.
But then being more involved, we found that there's so much beauty and power and strength here.
I'm so excited. So someone said this as a negative thing. The only people that follow Erwin are young, broken people.
Yeah, we got all of the givers and the old people.
Yeah, and I turned 66 this week. And
You didn't go.
but I'm younger than you guys. And but here's the thing: they're right. Mosaic is going to be packed with young, broken people.
Yeah.
Because broken people need a place to heal. And we're not only going to have young people, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of old people that love you. There are a lot of people like me. See, I don't really need this. Like, I'm happy just going to Switzerland and living in the mountains or something, you know.
Switzerland?
Or someplace, like, you know. I've had enough success in my life where I can just disappear. I'm here because I think this is the most exciting thing that's happening in the world.
Yes.
And I hope there's a day where we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of artists and entrepreneurs and creatives and slightly psychotic dreamers, you know, coming together and going, I can't believe I believe in God. Because when I speak on Sundays, I still have this little voice in my head going, I can't believe that I actually believe. But somehow Jesus crashed into my life and changed me. And I cannot deny that. And so I love science. I love physics. I love botany. Man, I'm telling you, I'm a person that I love Buddhism. You know, I do. I love studying mystic religions, and I love exploring everything in the universe. But the one thing I know is true is that Jesus is alive and that he will change your life.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for being part of this
You want
tonight.
to pray? Are you good? You want to come up? Or is that what we done? Is it? So
Good
just
night,
say
guys.
goodbye. All right,
Hopefully we'll
follow
see you
the
next week.
Instagram at Mosaic Roma Norte and Mindshift and conecta con nosotros. Follow. All right, there we go. Okay, bye. We love you guys. See you guys later.